Good evening and welcome to this season of Crosstalk. We're going to be talking about very exciting topics. We are going to be putting Jesus in the middle of it and the cross at the center of every conversation. My name is Reverend Otieno, welcoming you to this new season. And today, starting us off, what a topic this is going to be: taxation. You know how much furor that finance bill has caused. And today we just want to go into the mechanics of what is this taxation thing? What involves taxation? What informs the policies? What is it that we are so uncomfortable about? To bring us up to speed, we have Kennon Mbae. Kennon Mbae is a finance and taxation expert. Kennon, karibu.
Asante sana, Reverend Tom. Great to be here. Looking forward.
Thank you. And we have Ruth Ambugu.
Yes.
She is a politician, but she is also what you call a policy and governance expert. Karibu sana, Ruth.
Asante sana.
Get us going. What is tax? What is tax? Yes, any of you can take.
Well, tax, as the Bible puts it, is giving unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, when you looked at who Caesar was a very powerful leader. Mm. And Caesar was basically the head of the government of the day back then. Mm. And that was a statement that was made by Jesus himself when he was issuing one of his lessons and teachings to the people. Mm. And you know, when you look back at the lesson that was taught when the statement was made, and in the current day-to-day operations of our government, there's quite some similarities. The government of the day-to-day is basically a model of what used to happen in the Bible. And so if back then during the biblical days, we still live in the biblical days, but if back then during the times of Jesus, there was the law that give unto Caesar what belongs unto Caesar, then today the same shall apply, because systems of government are similar, and basically I think for now I will leave it at that.
So
yes.
We must pay tax.
We must pay tax. If we are to survive, we must pay tax.
Kennon.
I agree with Ruth in terms of the origin. We definitely give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Okay.
From a finance perspective, the way I look at it, you look at the private sector and the public sector. So taxation is moving funds from the private sector to the public sector. Caesar in this case. But then the thing would be when the public sector gets the funds. I mean, when I say public sector, that's very wide. But in general terms, when those funds go there, they are still supposed to help everybody. So taxation is that process of moving funds from private to public, but with an expectation, which I think will be the bone of contention today.
Tell us why we need to pay tax.
There are some services that cannot be done any other way. Think about national security. A function like national security can only be done from a public sector perspective. So there's sense to actually make that contribution so that when we all go to sleep, we are not worried about our borders. Look at roads. If you think about trying to make your own road, it is very difficult. So it is important because there are some goods and services that can only be provided that way. You leave it to the government to make sure that the basics are set as we continue doing other things.
Public goods and services.
Yes,
okay.
and I do agree with Kennon here, because, I mean, think of a government or a country where people privatize the most basic of services, where we say that, look, we are not going to have a national hospital, or we are not going to have a national system, healthcare system. And so everybody is at will to come up with their own hospitals. Very many Kenyans would be dying today because they would not definitely afford healthcare. If we were to come up with a system where we say, for instance, as he has put it, the road system, we would have people privatizing roads and saying that, you know, you will not pass through this particular road because this belongs to me. And the purpose of having a central body that provides such services is for purposes of regulation, just to avoid privatization and to avoid us getting into a situation where we are a country led by mafia. Yes.
Now, Finance Bill 2023, a lot of kelele has come from that. What's going on? From a layperson's point of view, I'm sitting behind my television, I want to understand what's going on in that space.
Okay, the finance bill this time, I think, is touching on areas that initially were not being touched. Talk about the housing bill. the housing levy. It started as a levy, it mutated into a tax within a period of 1 month.
What's the difference between a levy and a tax is what?
Basically, a levy, depending on how the law is written, a levy, you're supposed to get it back. The way it was structured in the first place is you give your money, after 7 years, you get back your money. Let alone whether you need the house or not. Let's not go there. But at least in that sense, everybody knew I'm going to get back my money. The tax in this case, once you give the 1.5%
gone.
That's it. That's gone. Please wait for the services. Now, that change, and even how it's been handled, the communication around the finance bill, if you ask me, has been unclear because top government officials will say one thing, the following day they're saying a different thing. Something of this magnitude, Reverend Tom, should be thought about nicely with time. By the time it's coming even to the public and to the press.
So time to lobby and
we know what is going on, but at least it doesn't look like that to me.
There's even Mandamano, Ruth.
You know,
what is all that
let
about?
me tell you, for me, Reverend Tom,
yes,
it is simply about expectations versus reality.
Okay.
It is simply about a promise that was made to Kenyans, and not just a single promise. Very many promises that were made to Kenyans, the middle class for that matter, and the low income earning community of the country, in the society, versus what is being delivered. Remember, we had a very high octane campaign just a few months ago, almost a year back, when very many promises were being made, and most of them, especially that are around, or that rather were made by the current government of this day, were promises around making life so easy.
Give me those specific ones that
they
are now
talked about
causing
they talked
taxation
about reducing.
tax.
In fact, now on the question of tax,
yes,
they literally mentioned that they would lower all taxes. They talked about so many taxes that they would lower. They kept talking about how life would be easy. They kept talking about how they would invest in the common wananchi. They kept talking about manufacturing. And some of those promises were shared between, Azimio and the current government of the day. And then now you make it to government. And suddenly, the very first thing that you do is go exactly behind, is go back on your word on the major promises that you made to Kenyans. You know, when you're enticing people to vote for you, the thing that makes the biggest difference sometimes is usually the promise that you'll make to somebody that promises to reduce the heavy burden that they already suffer in life as it stands right now. So when you tell me that life is going to be easier, and then you come and tell me, for instance, he's talked about housing levy. Let me talk about VAT. You come and tell me that, for instance, VAT is going to be at 16% on all products. And you even increase VAT or introduce VAT on products that no longer were being taxed, that were not being taxed previously. What you're doing to the Kenyan mwananchi is that already a constrained Kenyan right now will feel even further constrained. And when they feel further constrained, their anger boils to an extent where they start saying, you know what, now we are going to agitate for our rights.
Is there a possibility that life will get tough before it gets better?
There is a possibility, and I've heard the president talking about it and saying, you know, sometimes you get yourself into a position as a leader where you have to make decisions that are very unpopular. But when you look at the ordinary Kenyan mwananchi's situation as it stands right now, and the kind of burdens that we do have right now, pushing us beyond where we are right now would cause more damage to us. We are already living in a society where people are literally killing themselves and taking away the lives of their family members because they cannot afford to put bread to the table for that particular day. We are living in a society where right now, as it stands right now, I was having a conversation, and I even mentioned it to you earlier. I was having a conversation with a matatu driver, and he was talking to me and telling me how he had woken up at 4 a.m. This is a man, not a lady. That, you know, I woke up at 4 a.m. today. It's almost midday, and I woke up to look for money. And I have not made even a single coin today. I have not made money today. And you could feel the frustration in his voice. And that brought about a conversation that was so deep, you know, that expressed the kind of frustrations that Kenyans have. There's a level at which, had we been at as a country, then you would say that if you increase the taxes, then life can be difficult, but then after some time it will get better. But right now, as it stands, you already cannot afford to fuel your, if you're a boda rider, you already cannot afford to fuel your boda, meaning that if you took your boda on loan, you will have to forfeit your loan, because the other day also, I love having conversations with Kenyans as somebody who is a political mind and just interested in what human beings are thinking, my fellow Kenyans are thinking. This boda guy was telling me, so young lady, today if I'm given the option between putting food to the table for my family and paying back the loan, paying back my part of the loan today, will I pay back that loan or will I feed my family?
Very
you will
interesting.
definitely feed your family. And those kinds of frustrations are what are leading people to say, we are going to go to the streets. But also, unfortunately, Reverend Tom, the political class that should lead us and govern us and give us direction, which, and I'm talking about the opposition right now, unfortunately, we might not know whether their intentions of taking us to the streets are genuine or not.
We'll come back to that.
Yes.
We'll come back to that. Now, what informs Kennon? I want you to paint for us the nexus or the connection between policy and tax. Did the government just wake up and put this 16%, 20%, 1.5%, 1.5%?
Yes.
Where did it all come from? Was it
That's a wonderful
was it
question.
dreamed?
Let me tell you, Reverend Tom, what I think. Even if Azimio was in government today, there'll be no major difference.
Tell us about that.
The reason is because...
So now you are saying Kenya Kwanza would go to the street?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the thing. That's the thing. The structure of the country today, or how governance is, Kenya is a going concern. Look at public debt. I mean, the debt we're supposed to pay. If you look at the government, the estimates that were put there. Last year, it was 869 billion. In this year's budget, it is 986 billion. That's an increase of 117 billion shillings on debt repayment. Regardless of the government of the day, that has to be paid.
You have to pay.
Yes.
So that's what you need to see.
So you cannot risk not paying.
You can't. Then there's also the idea of politics versus reality, what Ruth is saying here. Unfortunately, what politicians tell us in both divides, whether it is Azimio,
Yes.
Kenya Kwanza, wherever it is, I can tell you, Reverend Tom, whatever they're telling us, they're in politics. These are politicians. So I ask myself, had they done the math? Because there's a difference between politics and finance. When someone is going to out there, and it doesn't matter who it is, and you make a promise, where is the money going to come from? How are you going to finance that? Sometimes you say, we'll sort it out,
As we go.
Okay. Now, when that comes into question, you start getting these problems that you're facing. A border person was promised too much. Because I'm also thinking, another thing that's happening is, the government is trying to do very many things
At the same time.
at the same time within a very short time.
Yeah.
While the intentions may be good, you need to get things gradually growing. And if you ask me where policy and finance comes, where they meet,
Yeah, where did these figures come from?
that's the thing.
These
A
ideas.
policy maker needs to ask the finance person, give me the numbers. How do they exactly look? And I'm sure we have very able people in this country. They are doing a fantastic job. But standing aside, you wonder, was there a proper communication between the two arms? When I say I want to do this as a politician, did I consult the finance person, or whatever they told me, does it tie with what I'm telling Kenyans? So too much is happening too fast. But I think also that there's a disconnect between the political class and the common wananchi.
Yes.
Political class. So, well, whichever part of the divide you belong,
Yes.
we have been called to the street.
Yes.
Why have we been called to the street?
First of all,
If what Kennon is saying is right, that there's
Yes.
nothing that can be done,
first of
why are
all,
we going to the street?
before we even go to the streets question,
Yes,
I agree with him that there's a lot to be done,
yes.
but within a very short time. There's a lot that the government wants to do within a very short time. However, where I disagree with him is that there are better ways to raise money to settle these obligations that we do have as a country. And I believe that taxation and over-taxation is not the best way to go about it. And maybe we'll be discussing that much later. And now let's go back to the streets. I mean, I'm not saying literally, let's go back to the streets.
Now let's hold it. Just hold it there. I'm gonna hold you back
Yes.
a bit. When we
Yes.
come back, we'll start with that
No,
street
okay.
matter as we begin to cure and land this discussion.
Okay.
Viewers, you're watching Crosstalk. We're back with a bang, and we thank God for the opportunity to put the cross in the middle of the conversation. We're taking a break. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
lost and broken world, constantly bombarded by messages of hate and atrocities. But with God, we can overcome. Find hope and restoration on the go through life-changing shows on the Family Media app.
And then you will lose yourself and gain the world. And Jesus said, what good is it?
Get to stream Family TV and Family Radio 316 straight from your phone. Catch up on a show you missed or create video streaming playlists by saving and watching videos from our huge variety of shows at your own convenience. Download the Family Media app, available for all Android and iOS users on the Google Play Store and Apple Store respectively. Family Media, keeping Jesus on the airwaves.
Welcome back to Crosstalk. We are talking taxation. And why is the finance bill such a problem? Finance bill 2023. Now, before we went to the break, you were talking to us about the streets. Why have we been going to the street? If things are the same, and we are saying if Azimio was there, they would still do what Ruto is doing. Why have we been called to the streets?
Well, first of all, you need to know that going back to the streets has a different connotation in the modern today's world. But the kind of streets we're talking about is maandamano.
Yes.
And I think you said, why are we being told to go back to the streets?
Yes.
And I would like to sort of correct you and tell you that we are not being told to go back to the streets. That at the point at which it has now come to, there have been different types of maandamanos. Some of them that, in my opinion, even the political side that I belong to, seemed to be very personally, seemed to have a personal agenda as opposed to a national agenda. But this particular one, Reverend Tom, Kenyans themselves are saying, and these are conversations that I have been a part of, these are discussions that I have sat in, and Kenyans are saying, you know what, this time round, tell us we are going to the streets, or this time round, give us the person who will lead us to the streets.
So you are being pushed?
No, basically
Kenyans
what I'm saying, Kenyans are saying right now, we are ready to go to the streets.
Okay.
We just need a leader.
Very interesting.
The politicians are no longer telling Kenyans this time round that go to the streets. This time round it is coming from within. That they have seen the need, they have seen how much of a burden this finance bill is going to be to them, and they're now saying go to the streets. Now, my challenge as a governance expert is the timing of these streets, the timing of this call to go to the streets. You know, and by the way, as Kenyans, we must understand that constitutionally speaking, it is our right to go to the streets. So that we remove the negative connotation we always have whenever we are told there's a maandamano ongoing. Because sometimes, and I hope and I believe and I pray that we never get to the point where we realize how important going to the streets is rather. There are countries where people paid lip service to the problems that were going on in their own countries. They kept quiet. The politicians did what they do best, served their own interests. And by the time the Mwananchi realized that our rights had been violated, it was too late. Look at what happened to Argentina. Look at what happened to countries that crumbled in the northern part of Africa when they had to get to the point where they were saying now, enough is truly enough, we are going to the streets. By that particular time, their connotation or the idea of going to the streets was so bad, the countries were destroyed. By the time they were done with expressing themselves, the countries were destroyed. So when you hear the call to go back and demand for your rights, first of all, as Kenyans, we must realize when it is too early, or rather before it is too late, when can we agitate for our rights?
But how do you get yourself, how do you get yourself out of this conundrum, this particular one?
How we get ourselves,
you expect services, taxes must be collected.
Yes.
Promises must be delivered.
Yes.
And you are Mheshimiwa Ruto. What do you do?
What you do as Mheshimiwa Ruto, or as the Honorable President.
How do you balance this entire
There is so
ecosystem?
much, an economist will tell you, and I am not one, but I will tell you with my little knowledge of economics, that there are certain things that you can do to reduce the burdens or to meet the obligations that you have without necessarily increasing taxes. Number one, cut on expenditure. It was so interesting to Kenyans, and one of the things that got Kenyans very angry was that while on one hand, We were talking about increasing taxation to Kenyans. On the other hand, the budget for allocation for State House and key offices was being increased. So as a government, what are your priorities? Because budgeting, according to my little understanding of budgeting, it follows functions.
Okay.
That there have to be certain functions for you to allocate budgets, a budget to. So look at your functions and ask yourself, which ones are very necessary, which ones are not. So if anything, if they knew that Kenyans were suffering, and I'm sure they did, they should have said that, first of all, we as the leaders themselves, we are leading by example. We are cutting on our expenditure as leaders. But unfortunately, within a period of 8 months of being in power, their budget expenditure has been increased by twice. Second, the other thing we could also do is restructure our debt. Get into agreements with countries that we owe debts to. And come up with certain concessions, come up with certain agreements that make it possible for us to pay our debts with, agreements can be made of very different kinds. It could be an agreement that says Kenya shall export something in exchange for you guys.
So you barter
trade some of these things. Some of them you come to concessions that say we don't have to pay this debt within this particular period of time. There is so many things that we can do as a country to ensure to lower the burden that Kenyans do have. And also, simply invest in the manufacturing sector.
Okay.
Put as many young Kenyans as possible to work.
We'll come to that.
Yes.
We'll come to the Kennon.
Yes.
As a technician, sitting over this situation, you have all these things to balance.
Yes.
You have debt you can't run away from. You have development you have to deliver. You have a country that almost has empty coffers.
Yes.
And you are the president.
Okay.
And you have to craft a taxation bill. Where do you go? How do we sort this problem?
I think for me the first thing is communicate to Kenyans. Figures are very simple to explain. Figures don't lie. I don't think we are getting 100% communication in this case because the people are not understanding.
What would you remove? Sorry I have to interrupt. What would you remove? What would you vary? What would you? Okay, continue. Let me not interrupt.
I'll come to that. So that's one. Second thing, I've worked in private sector for a while. I know what it means to account for 20 shillings.
Yeah.
You can have systems that account to the cent. In government, that doesn't happen. There's a lot of wastage, and that wastage is sometimes supported by the governance and the systems in place. Someone will tell you, I didn't break any law by buying a pen at 200 shillings, and they're right, because it's just 3 bidders, lowest bidder. So you bid 600, 200, I bid 300, she gets the work. So there's also a structure in how things are being run. There's a part of what is happening, I can tell you, and let me correct my sister Ruth. I didn't mean that there's nothing we can do. What I meant to say is the way the structures are, any political government will find itself in the same place. I can get a pen at 200, I'll get. Human nature, Reverend, look at the Bible. Human nature, we are inherently sinful unless Christ comes in the middle and tries to tamper some of these things. If you give it, there are people who are waiting for the opportunity. We are crying in the streets, but what we don't have is an opportunity. So the thing is, the way it's structured today, if I was the president today, that's what would start. Let's change even just the procurement law. This pen cannot be 200 shillings. It cannot be.
If I walk into the shop, I get it for 50 bob.
Exactly, 50 is even a lot because you're buying bulk. You can get it for 40 or 30.
20 bob.
Exactly. So for me, that's how I look at it. The idea to restructure debts, it's a good one. But as a finance person, I want to go back to why are we where we are? Let's face it. This debt was taken 10 years ago.
That's matured.
There was a plan. So you can restructure, that is you're patching up. You're patching up something. But if you want to go forward as a country, something went wrong in the planning of a debt that has been here for 10 years. I'm sure when you look at those memorandum, the debt was supposed to do this and bring this and bring this and be repaid by X. What happened? It is people, corruption, governance. Let's call it as it is, Reverend Tom. It is not so difficult. It is not so difficult. It is the political will and the change in how the laws are done. Exactly.
So are you saying we go after those who stole the money?
Of course.
And recover the money?
That, first of all, on paper is very clear. Anybody who wants to do that, Reverend Tom, the intelligence we have in Kenya and in this world, you try steal a chicken, Go hide somewhere in Kilgoris.
They will know you stole the chicken.
We will pick you from Kilgoris.
Yeah.
They don't miss a hairbreadth.
That's the thing. So the idea is not even the systems and how it works. It is the will to do it. From a finance perspective, anybody can do this work. Anybody can balance these numbers.
So the issue is values.
The issue is values, Reverend. Because how else can we say that I was given a contract to do a road? I already know I don't intend to do the road. I know that. And at most, if I do it, it will be shoddy. I know that when I'm going in. So, and as I'm saying, seated here, unless we bring God, it is almost impossible that the crop of people, I do personal financial coaching and I go talk to youth and teenagers. You'll be shocked what they tell you. So you're trying to tell them, no, you can get your money this way, put it in this bill, Sijui treasury bill when 30 years. 30 years? 30 years? They tell you why. Why should I wait for 30 years? For what? Yet I can go pass a deal here, do this and get the money. Even as a trainer, you start wondering, what are you exactly telling this person?
Closing comments, very briefly.
Closing comments. I think, and I strongly believe, I strongly believe that much as the country seems to be heading to a very different direction that many of us didn't expect, I believe that there is hope.
Okay.
There is hope in this generation of mine, this very specific generation that he's talking about, the generation below the age of 30. And that many of us don't seem to be involved in governance and to be paying attention to what is happening to our country economically, politically, and governance-wise speaking. But we can actually be the generation that can rescue us from the pitfalls that we are headed towards. So I am making a call to the young generation of today, the generation below the age of 35. Let us get up. Let us be the ones to say we need that value system. Let us be the ones to begin practicing it so that before we are corrupted, we actually even change the mindset of those who have gone ahead of us, of those who are already corrupted, and make them realize that things can be done differently for the sake of our own personal selves, our families, and the good of the country. Yes.
Thank you. And closing comments.
I will say that from a finance and tax perspective, we have it right. Figures are tying, they can tie, and we'll continue moving that forward because that's a very important part of the discussion. And I would say, I would applaud actually the government. Everybody's making genuine effort to at least move the needle, even if it's 1 inch. So all appreciations go to them. I will still go back to values. We can't separate the two. That as a nation, we need to wake up and see, Tom, even if you had 6 beds, you can only sleep in 1 bed at a time. Get something called contentment. Contentment in this nation. Draw the line. Mind your neighbor, because when you're doing all these things, someone else is suffering somewhere. There's a child somewhere who cannot go to hospital because they got a snake bite because you stole the money. Surely it has to go to the value systems and getting it right from the top up. Thank you.
Kennon Mbae, thank you very much for coming and for your time.
Thank you.
Mheshimiwa Ruth Ambugu, thank you for coming. Soon to be. No, we call things as they are coming. So you receive that.
Amen.
Thank you very much for coming.
Asante.
And thank you for your contribution to this show. This has been Crosstalk. Wow, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? We're talking values. Taxation is not in isolation. There must be values that help us use that money properly. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next week, and God bless you.